this session's first Interstate Cooperation Committee. We do have a quorum today. We are the smallest committee in the Georgia Senate, and happy to have both Senator James and Senator Sims here. Thank you. We've only have one piece of legislation that the committee is going to hear today. It's called the Defend the Guard Act. It's a piece of legislation that I introduced earlier this session. And if you would like to testify about this, just come up to the front here. There's a sign-up sheet and just sign your name there. We have a couple people online who have signed up to testify today. Essentially what this bill does, and I think it's more important than ever as we recently have lost 3 of our very own Georgians, Sergeant Brianna Moffitt, Sergeant Kennedy Sanders, Staff Sergeant William Rivers. This is our blood. This is our treasure in the state of Georgia, and they were recently killed in a combat situation over in Jordan. And what this piece of legislation does is it takes what we have control over here in the state of Georgia with our National Guard and allows us as a Senate body, as a legislature, to have a say-so when it comes to sending our men and women in harm's way. So the way the Constitution is written, Article 1, Section 8, it basically gives the power to declare war to the U.S. Congress, but it does give circumstances where the executive can use active military, one of which is to repel an insurrection, repel an invasion, or to uphold the laws of the Union. This piece of legislation doesn't worry about those things. All it says is with our Georgia National Guard, which operates under Title 10 and Title 32, it says that under Title 10, the Georgia National Guard shall not be put in an active combat situation without a declaration of war by the Congress. As we know, with the war on terror, about 50% of the active duty military were just involved under Title 10, but the other 50% or so were also National Guard members, which were involved in Title 32. Now, to understand Title 10 and Title 32, Title 10 is essentially the National Guard, runs under the Commander-in-Chief being the President of the United States, and then Title 32 says that the Governor is the Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard. This legislation doesn't affect the Governor under Title 32 at all. The Governor still has the power to deploy the National Guard as he sees fit. Natural disasters, COVID-19, all those different times that we've deployed the National Guard. All it does is it narrows down onto Title 10 and says that we cannot put them in an active duty combat situation. Now, some people have questioned the constitutionality of even this, but in Title 10, subsection D, it states that at any time an authority designated by the Secretary, and I'll enter this into the record of the committee, may order a member of the reserve component under his jurisdiction to active duty to retain him on active duty without the consent of the member. However, this is the key part. A member of the Army National Guard of the United States or the Air National Guard of the United States may not be ordered to active duty under this subsection without the consent of the governor or the appropriate authority of the state concerned. Now, we are the appropriate authority of the state concerned. And if there's any questions by the committee, or we'll go into some different testimony of those who have signed up. All right. The first person who is signed up is Brian Allen. Just state who you're with, Brian, and let's try to keep it, under 4 minutes if we can.
Hello, I'm Brian Allen.
Hold on 1 second. There you go.
We good? Okay. Hello, I'm Brian Allen, Vice Chair, Libertarian Party of Georgia. I'm not an expert who has extensively studied U.S. foreign policy, nor am I a veteran who has lived through it firsthand. I'll defer to those who know more than I do in those areas, and I hope that you'll listen to them. What I can say is that the United States Constitution and the Georgia Constitution are both perfectly clear. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution states that Congress has the power to declare war and to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Notably, it does not provide for calling forth the militia to invade others. Article 2, Section 2 states that the president is the commander-in-chief of the militia of the several states, but only when they have been called into actual service, which again is a power of Congress. The 10th Amendment states that the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, or reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. If the federal government hasn't been specifically delegated a power, then it doesn't have it. Going to the Georgia Constitution, we find Article 3, Section 6, Paragraph 2, which states that the General Assembly shall have the power to provide by law for militia. And then when we look at Title 38, Chapter 2, the Official Code of Georgia annotated, we can see that the Georgia National Guard is indeed part of the militia. Going back to the Georgia Constitution, we find that Article 5, Section 2, Paragraph 3, which states that the governor shall be the commander-in-chief of the military forces of this state. When you take all this together, the conclusion is inescapable. The Georgia National Guard is not a federal military reserve force to be called up whenever the president wants. It's part of the state militia, which can only be called forth by Congress and only for specific purposes. It is long past time that the states reasserted this fact. I hope that you'll agree that the foreign policy of the United States has been a disaster both for people in other countries and for people here at home. I hope you'll agree that the young men and women of Georgia who sign up for the National Guard thinking that they'll be serving their communities shouldn't find themselves shipped off overseas when war hasn't even been declared. Even if you don't, though, even if you remain wholly unconvinced in those areas, this is supposed to be a nation of laws, a nation where governments only exercise specified powers rather than wield arbitrary force. The ends do not, in fact, justify the means. That way lies tyranny, the loss of liberty in the name of convenience or the greater good as defined by politicians and bureaucrats. Senate Bill 462 does not prevent the Georgia National Guard from being called forth into service. All it says is that the Constitution must be followed. Thank you for your time and attention. Any questions?
Any questions from the committee? Okay, no, Brian, thank you so much. Next is Zachary Varnell. Yep. You can just try to keep it under 4 minutes.
All right. Hi there, I'm Zachary Varnell. It's good to meet you guys. I've contacted you all. It's good to see you in person, especially you, Senator James. I was one of your constituents until this recent redistricting, so I'll still keep in touch. Okay. Anyway, thank you all for having me today to speak in support of this bill, Defend the Guard Act. The essence of Defend the Guard is to ensure that the deployment of the Georgia National Guard is grounded in a process that reflects the values of Georgians. Requiring a formal declaration of war by Congress before any deployment emphasizes the importance of transparent democratic decision-making. It ensures those who are asked to serve in harm's way in the communities that they come from have had their voices heard through their elected representatives. By ensuring that their deployment is backed by a formal declaration of war, we are taking a stand for their rights, their families, and their communities. We are affirming that their service and their sacrifice and their safety are of paramount importance and that deserve the highest level of scrutiny and support. I urge the committee to support this bill as a testament to our shared values and unwavering support for those who serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Any questions for Zach? All right, and then we have a Sean Miller. Sean, if you can just try to keep it under 4 minutes, please.
Do my best, sir. Good afternoon, distinguished members of the Interstate Cooperation Committee. My name is Sean Miller. I'm with the Liberty Policy Alliance. And as somebody who's a military brat, this issue is very personal for me. When I was younger, my father was often deployed overseas. And there were times that I was hoping that he would just come home safe. There were, granted, I was only maybe 5. My father retired just before 9/11 happened, but oftentimes he was deployed into hot zones like Kuwait. This was post Desert Storm. And like I said, I felt this fear often. And I personally don't want young Georgians who are like myself at the time to feel that same fear that I felt, that they would grow up with, that they could possibly grow up without a father, without a mother, without a brother, without somebody in their life who meant so much to them. But we look at this from another issue. Oftentimes this is this should be a very bipartisan issue, not wanting to send young men and women off to uncontested conflicts without especially without, at least without congressional approval. And we see it all. We're seeing it right now. We lost 3 service members over in Jordan, not particularly a hotbed for terrorism at the moment, and it's not a war zone, but they were still 2 of them very young. One of them was absolutely a father looking forward to come home to his watching their child graduate. And then, but at the end of the day, like how much longer do we have to live in this era of Bush Cheney foreign policy where everybody gets sent off because it's somehow America's defining responsibility to advance democracy, when clearly these people in these nations do not want it, or they do not appreciate the American involvement in this process. So at the end of the day, I would urge everyone on the committee to, at the very least, even if you don't vote for it on the floor in front of the whole Senate, at least vote it out of committee for debate. I feel like that's at the bare minimum I could ask. I would hope you vote yes when it reaches the floor, but I would certainly hope that you would vote yes out of committee. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you, Sean. All right. We'll go to Zoom now. We have Diego Riviera. Diego, can you pop up on your screen here?
Yes, I sure can.
Hey, Diego.
How we doing?
Can you give us about 4 minutes, please? No
Yeah.
longer than 4.
Absolutely. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I am the director of field operations for an organization called Bring Our Troops Home. Our job is to do everything from filing the bill to getting it scheduled, getting it heard, getting it voted, and getting it passed. That is our priority, is to promote this legislation. What I can tell you is that there's an overwhelming enthusiasm that I see from all over the country. This has grown into something way bigger than just our organization. It's become a national movement. And so you might be interested to know that right now, as we're hearing this, there are people from Texas, California, New York, Maine, Florida, all over the country that are following this because they're generally interested. And here's why. I'm sure all of you have eyeballs, and I'm sure all of you can hear. You can probably tell right now that we're in some sort of way sleepwalking into Armageddon, or sleepwalking into a potential world war. And so what this bill does is at least it puts a halt on that. And there's a lot of people that are paying attention. You might have noticed that people were calling, trying to get a hold of you. People were calling me to tell me about this bill. They were trying to inform me and tell me, hey, by the way, this is coming up in Georgia. And there's just a natural enthusiasm for this. So what I don't perceive as happening is I don't see that this the tube is going to be put back in the toothpaste. I don't perceive that as happening. What I do imagine is that the longer that this bill is out there, the more refusal that it ever gets to be heard, to be voted, the more enthusiasm it's going to get, the more enthusiasm it has gotten. I would like to just maybe give some context for where this bill's been. This bill's been around for about 10 years. Up until about 2 years ago, it was filed in about 2 states. As of this year, it's in over 30 states. And then probably more next go around. So that would just like to put a little bit of context. And then what I'd also like to say as well is that, you know, with these 3 members dying, that should at least make us question this. And so whatever your position is on this, I would just like to say, I don't want to position ourselves to the right of Dick Cheney on these issues. I want to say that for many of us in this country, we've gotten it right. What are we doing? This bill is simple. In fact, if you look at the language, it's simple. It's very narrow in what it does and what it asks for. Very simply, it just says, well, you know, you can follow the Constitution, but also, are we going to say that after the death of these young men, that at the same time, Georgia has no say over its sovereignty, that our blood and treasure will be wasted with no remorse, and Georgia has no say? And are we to do this now by positioning ourselves to the right of Dick Cheney, to the right of Rand Paul? I don't think that's going to work. But again, what I would like to say is even from a director of this, even I am overwhelmed with the movement that is behind this because the grassroots swelling for this is bigger than I ever imagined. This has grown exponentially. People are more enthusiastic and they will not be less inquisitive. So I encourage you today to listen to it. I encourage you to obviously hear us out, vote for it, pass it, and let's debate this thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Diego. Is there any other discussion from the committee?
Did you say you had two?
Ma'am?
Did you say you had another caller?
Oh, there is. Hello. This is Scott?
Got a question?
We have a, yeah. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, what work was done to consider the national security implications of limiting the involvement of the National Guard?
So essentially our national force is it's about 45 to 50% National Guard, and then about 50% of just general the U.S. military. I think obviously when the United States is at threat, the president has the ability to send troops right away. This bill has no effect on that 50% that is involved under strictly Title 10. This piece of legislation only involves National Guard, which is under Title 32 and Title 10. So I don't think it has any effect whatsoever when it comes to defending our country in an immediate threat. All right, we're going to hear from witness Scott Horton. Okay.
Your Honors, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I just want to say very briefly what a great opportunity these gentlemen are presenting us with today. The anti-war movement has desperately needed the conservative movement's support for so long, and now we have it. And not only that, but they're taking the lead. And not only that, but in this case, they are a bunch of really great, proud American patriotic combat veterans of our recent Middle East wars, such as the leaders of BringOurTroopsHome.us, the spearhead of this movement. For example, Diego Rivera, who you just heard from. And not only that, but they're invoking George Washington's U.S. Constitution, demanding that their state governments protect them from irresponsible leadership in the U.S. Congress. If a situation is important enough for this country to start a war, then it has to be important enough for Congress to follow the constitutional mandate and declare war. In a very literal sense, these really are just words on paper. They are to be taken seriously by we the people or not. But listen carefully to what these men are saying. Their oath to the Constitution is deadly serious to them. And in this current era, they have lost confidence in those who owe that same allegiance to the Constitution, yet fail to live up to their responsibility under it when sending state guard forces abroad or allowing them to be sent. And their movement is catching on. So those of us who have recommended non-intervention are so pleased to have these men leading the modern American anti-war movement. And I hope that you will agree that their arrival marks a real consensus that we need, a bipartisan consensus, to demand legitimate constitutional processes before the president can send our state guard forces into foreign danger. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Does anyone have any questions for Scott? All right. Is there any discussion on the bill? You'd like to speak? Okay, just come up to the mic and state who you are, please.
My name is Chase Oliver from the city of Atlanta. I want to speak in favor of this bill. I believe it does deserve a vote on the floor. In fact, I was a little lost getting in here, so I was a little late to the meeting, but I ran into a state senator who directed me to where I needed to go. And because of that, I got to talk to him a little bit about Defend the Guard. And he says, you know, that sounds pretty rational, that if there's not a declared war, we shouldn't be sending our National Guard troops to go fight there. It's basically in line with what the Constitution spells out for us. Now, I got involved in politics because I opposed war, because I saw 9/11 happen when I was in school, and I saw friends of mine get sent to go fight these wars overseas. Now, we can talk about whether those wars were valid or invalid. I'm sure there's a variety of opinion on that. But what I see is that there are Georgia National Guard members. It's literally in the name, Georgia Guard. They're supposed to be here defending us at home, and they're being sent overseas to fight wars. When Hurricane Katrina happened, I got to hear from people in Louisiana who talked about how they were really upset that the Louisiana National Guard was fighting in Iraq instead of helping people off rooftops during a natural disaster. If such a disaster were to occur in Georgia, I would hope that the Georgia National Guard would be here to help the citizens of Georgia as needed. If there's a war that is bad enough for us to have to go fight and send our National Guard overseas, it needs to be formally declared by Congress. What we've had my entire adult life is undeclared wars. We've used an authorization of military force that has allowed us to send troops all over the world. And now we've lost 3 Georgia military members in Jordan. Why did they have to be there? And if they're going to be there, shouldn't they be formally declared, formally sent there by Congress and not just by executive fiat? And so I would hope that you can see that this is an issue that is important for states' rights under the 10th Amendment, but also an issue that relates to peace, our foreign policy, and the fact that we have to maybe change the way that we've been engaging around the world. And part of that involves the legislature of Georgia using the power that they have to put a stop to what I see as a war machine my entire adult life. And so I would urge the members to please put this on the floor for a vote. Let your colleagues hear about this, hear about the testimony, and actually have a vote, because that's what your job is. There's nothing that should prevent this from going to the floor. It's constitutional. It is something that many Georgians want. I mean, I just lobbied a state senator out the door in 5 minutes and got them involved in this. I think the rest of the state senate deserves to hear this. But thank you for hearing from me. Thank you for taking time for this meeting. I really appreciate it. And I hope that we can lead the way on Defend the Guard around the country. Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, sign up there. All right. Would anybody else like to come and speak?
Good afternoon. My name is John Eiler. I'm an attorney, Emory Law, 17L, graduate of the University of Georgia's Terry College of Business, BBA Economics. When I'm looking at this, I'm most concerned about protecting the interests of federalism in this country, making sure that the states are able to put a hold on our people, even though we are a part of the country, we are not necessarily independent of our own interests. So for that, I advocate for this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? All right, any discussion from the committee? At the appropriate time, I'd entertain a motion to do pass. We have a motion to do pass by Senator James. Do we have a second? We have a second from Senator Sims. All those in favor will raise their right hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed? We have one opposed, Senator Estevez. All right. Any other business we need to take up here in Interstate Cooperation, members? All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Yes.
I'm just glad that we have been assigned a good bill this time and one that we all had our own stuff. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Vice Chairman. And motion to adjourn? So moved. Second, Senator Sims. All right, it's been thirded by Senator Estevez. Unanimously passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.